Resources for Immigrants is a private organization that provides information on relearning, rebuilding, and resettling for immigrants in Canada. The organization partners with several other organizations and businesses to offer quality services to immigrants in Calgary, Alberta. Since it was founded in June 2020, Resources for Immigrants has served over 300 immigrants, offering valuable and timely information on career development, education, immigration, and settlement, thereby changing one life at a time. You can read more about us at www.resourcesforimmigrants.ca. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Also, we have a lot of information for you on YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe. The quickest way to contact us is through our email address, hello@resourcesforimmigrants.ca. I would like to talk about the sponsors of this event. We have Benedicta's Beauty Lab, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what she does later. We also have Shori Law, and then we have Center for Newcomers. I would like to request you to remain seated, relaxed, and enjoy what we are going to offer today. And then at the end of the day, we are going to have some giveaways. Okay, at this point, I would like to introduce to you the speakers, and the first one is Rose Ondieki. Rose currently works as a case manager supporting individuals with developmental disabilities. She graduated with a BSN degree from Oral Roberts University in Oklahoma. Her previous work includes working as an educator, a graduate nurse, and volunteering with various communities wherever she has lived. She is an amazing personality, and I'll let you meet her when her time is right. Next, we have Kate Koei, and Kate is a professional counselor with a passion for fostering healthy relationships within families, starting from the knowledge that our primary relationships shape who we are and how we interact with others. That's another wonderful person that I want you to meet. So I'll let Kate and Rose take it away. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Charlotte, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you very, very much for organizing this wonderful, wonderful event for women. We are very excited to be here, and thank you to everybody that was able to spare a little bit of their time today to hang out with us to discuss home guilt and self-care. So without wasting a lot of time, we're just gonna dig into it and get started. Katie and I have known each other for many, many years. And Kate, by the way, it's a pleasure to be in your presence. And I'm really excited that we are doing this together with Charlotte. So the first thing we're going to discuss is mom guilt, and then we'll dive into self-care and see what that looks like. What is mom guilt? What is self-care? What does self-care look like? What are some of the myths about self-care? And what are some of the practical ways that we can, practice self-care? And one of the biggest things we have come across is that we want to make self-care something that we do on a regular basis so that we can prevent burnout. So what is mom guilt? Most of you here that have joined us are mothers, maybe your mothers to be, or you're a mother figure to somebody. So, if you fall in that category, probably you know something about mom guilt. Not to dismiss those people that don't think mom guilt is a thing, because, we all have different views to life. And some people do think that mom guilt is actually not a thing. Majority of people do think mom guilt does exist. I have experienced it, I'm a mother. And, let's discuss a little bit about that and what to do about it. So what's the definition of mom guilt? Mom guilt basically is, that feeling you get that you're not enough, or you're not doing enough, or your decisions are not making sense. You second guess a lot of your decisions, or you feel that, your life is a mess, or some of the decisions you're making are creating a mess. So that, and it's okay to sometimes feel like, oh, that decision I made maybe wasn't the greatest. But if you find that this is something that's happening on a constant basis, then perhaps it's time to actually address that. In some extreme situations, mom guilt can lead to some, serious problems where you might not be able to function the way you normally do on a day-to-day basis. So it's really good to be able to recognize mom guilt and address it as soon as you can. Because once we reach burnout, it's really, really difficult to get back to our baseline. So what are some of the reasons you will see mom guilt? There's so many different things that can contribute to mom guilt. One of them is pressure from yourself, pressure from people, especially your family. Hello, anybody have in-laws in here, or cousins, or people who are probably older than you that maybe know a little bit more than you. They might give you suggestions and you feel this pressure that you really need to do things a certain way. Someone might tell you, hey, that's not how you hold your baby. The baby should be held like this. Or the baby should sleep facing down. And you're thinking, oh, maybe it should sleep. Some of these are, little pressures from people, especially people we love, people we care about, even people we probably don't know, can contribute to mom guilt. It's really good to be able to recognize when somebody's just giving you a suggestion, and when you're reaching a point where you're like, was that a suggestion, or am I overreacting to their suggestion? Social media is one big contributor to mom guilt. Most of us, if you ask me to send you a photo of myself, I'm probably gonna look for the best photo and send it to you. And if you look at that photo, maybe I have it photoshopped, you might look at it and say, oh, that lady is so perfect. What's wrong with me? And, so you start judging yourself or comparing yourself to other people, and that can actually contribute to mom guilt if we are not careful. The other thing is, generally as women, we might experience insecurity. So we are not very confident, we doubt ourselves. So if we are insecure, and insecurity can come in many forms, and sometimes it's temporary. But if you find it's a constant, then possibly that can contribute to mom guilt. So how do you know that you're going through mom guilt? There are quite a few indicators that can tell you that maybe this is mom guilt. Some of these indicators actually can apply to other things. But if you're experiencing mom guilt, you'll find that maybe your sleep patterns are changing. Maybe you used to sleep at a certain time. You realize maybe you're taking longer to fall asleep. You're going to bed late. Or if you have your regular sleep, when you wake up in the morning, you're not going to feel as well rested or as energized to be able to carry on with the duties of the day. That's one indicator that you're experiencing mom guilt. Another indicator is you might have indigestion, stomach problems, muscle tension. And in some cases, how you know that you're experiencing mom guilt, there's OCD, where you feel, this compulsive ability to want to, do everything perfectly. If I put my flower vase here, I want it to stay there. Things have to be like strategically organized in your home, or else if things go out of proportion, that could throw you off guard. That's one other way of telling that you may be experiencing mom guilt because of compulsive, tendencies. Another biggest one is anxiety. We from time to time worry about things, and that's normal. But if you find that your anxiety is constant and affecting your ability to do your daily chores, then maybe it's time to sit back and pay attention. You may experience depression, other things as oversensitivities or overreactions. You may be feeling overwhelmed. And moms are not perfect. We will feel overwhelmed at some point. It's normal to feel that. I think the biggest difference is if you're finding that you're overwhelmed all the time, that means maybe we need to take action. Sometimes you might feel panicky or feel this sense of, you might feel panicky or a dread of weight on your shoulders where you feel heavy, like you have this weight that you can't just shake it off no matter what you do. Low self-esteem, that can be also one indicator that you're experiencing mom guilt. Shame, you're not proud of yourself. And I know I'm guilty of this, constantly putting other people before you. In some cases, yes, it's okay to put your children and your loved ones before you, depending on the situation. But you don't want that to be something that you do on a regular basis, because it will take away from, the energy and the time that you need to spend on yourself, so you can be energized, so you can unwind, and so that you can be useful and meaningful to other people. Another indicator of mom guilt is avoiding a full range of emotion. Probably, I'm gonna bet that maybe half of us probably can identify with that, where maybe it's because you want to protect your children, you want to protect your loved ones. So you're not going to let all your emotions show. If you're sad, you're going to suppress that emotion or sadness and express it in a different way. Maybe it will come off as anger. So if you're finding that you're avoiding your full range of emotional expression, that could be an indicator that maybe we are also going through mom guilt. Another thing is having negative thoughts about ourselves, about our family members, about our children, negative thoughts about the decisions we are making. That's one other indicator. And here's another big one: addictive behaviors. You might find that maybe you're drinking more than usual, you're overeating, and overeating is a really common indicator for a lot of mothers. And I know we're talking about moms today, but even fathers and other humans out there, you might be self-medicating with food, alcohol, and in some cases, and I know I'm guilty, some of my friends are here, they can testify, shopping for things you actually don't need, overspending. So, that's something to really watch out for. Overdoing things, overworking, overscheduling yourself, always seeking to be perfect. Another one is spending a massive amount of time on social media. And I mentioned before that, social media is a wonderful, wonderful tool. But if we find that, we are comparing ourselves to the images and updates of other people on social media, that can be very, very devastating. Because as I said, most people on social media don't put their worst photos out there, don't put their worst experiences out there. They're going to put their marvelous vacation, their photoshopped photos, their amazing experiences. And if you judge yourself based on that and compare yourself to that, then yes, that can be extremely, extremely dangerous. Okay, we talked about insecurities. I'm almost done on this section. Having an unreasonable expectation of happiness can be another indicator that we're experiencing mom guilt. And lastly, as a mother, if I go to see my family doctor or some other professional, they'll give some sort of suggestion to me. And, instead of just seeing it as face value, what they said, when I'm experiencing mom guilt, I might go home and think, why did he suggest that? Why did she say that? Does that mean I'm inadequate? Does that mean I am not enough? So anyway, those are some of the contributors of mom guilt. And so now that we know what mom guilt is, what it looks like, some of the indicators, I think it's fair that we address, how do we go about that once we've identified that? And next, we're going to share, what is self-care? And my colleague, Katie, is going to discuss a little bit about what self-care is.
Thank you, Rose, for introducing mom guilt. And I'll just give a brief introduction on what self-care is. Self-care is anything you do to be good to yourself. And it sounds really easy said, but I think we all understand the culture of when you do something good for yourself, it's an indication of selfishness. It's an indication that you are giving to yourself and because somebody else is missing out. And we miss to realize that it is possible to attend to both people. And you cannot give out of an empty cup. So anything you do that is good to yourself is self-care. It's being as kind to yourself as you'd be to others. And being as kind to yourself as you'd be to others means looking at yourself and saying that if my friend was in this situation, what would I say to them? A lot of times we look at ourselves and you want to sit down and you feel you should do something. So imagine that a friend of yours called you and said, I'm exhausted. Would you say, you're a little lazy, get up and go do something? But a lot of times those are the conversations that we have with ourselves. So one of the ways that we can do self-care is to be as kind to ourselves as we would be to other people. Self-care is knowing when your resources are running low and stepping back and replenishing them rather than letting yourself get drained. So you do not have to wait until that moment that you feel you're breaking down or you're falling sick to be able to take care of yourself. Self-care is actually being able to pay attention to yourself moment by moment. So it's not a Saturday event. It's not a holiday event. It's as you go through your day, how are you feeling? When do you need to sit down? When do you need to listen to your emotions? When do you need to attend to yourself? When do you need space from other people? When do you need to ask for help? And it also integrates self-compassion, which is what I'll come to shortly. And also, it's important to note that everything that feels good is not necessarily self-care. As Rose mentioned, we can find ourselves getting into drugs and alcohol or overeating. Overeating is a common thing. Over-exercising is a new thing that's also happening with people. Because exercise is a good thing, sometimes people feel that over-exercising is not, but over-exercising is also addiction these days. So it's just good to know when you're overindulging or participating in unhealthy habits in the name of self-care. So touching on self-compassion, you cannot actively practice self-care without self-compassion. And self-compassion is being able to being understanding of yourself, knowing that we suffer. So you will suffer, you will fail, you will feel inadequate. And rather than ignoring your pain or indulging in self-criticism, you are kind to yourself. And there are three elements of self-compassion, and it's self-kindness versus self-judgment. So you don't have to evaluate everything that happens to you with a critical eye. It's just acknowledging that you're human and you're imperfect and things happen. And it is not it's not a reflection of who you are or what you can be. Then there's the common humanity versus isolation. Sometimes we go through things and we think we're the only ones that are doing them. We're the only ones that are not perfect. We're the only ones that are struggling. We're the only ones that can't make 3 meals a day for our kids and our families. But just acknowledging the humanity, the commonness of all of us, and knowing that you're never alone in your struggles is also helpful in being compassionate to yourself. And then there's mindfulness over self-identification. So mindfulness means just acknowledging who you are, being in the present moment, and letting things go without judgment. You do not have to judge yourself for every bad thought you have, for feeling envious of another person that is able to do it well, for feeling that you're not as well dressed as somebody else. Don't judge yourself for those things. Let it pass. It's a thought. You're not acting on it. Accept who you are and just be kind to yourself. So that's an element. So self-compassion is a significant part of self-care. And then I will let Rose touch on the myths of self-care.
Wow. Thank you so much, Kate. That's all very wonderful points that you have shared with us. So my goodness, there are so many myths out there about self-care. And one of them is that self-care is for women or people with poor mental health. Is that true? You know, as long as you are a human being, you are susceptible to burnout. Whether you're a man, whether you're a child, you're human, you may experience burnout at some point. So really, burnout or, problems with self-care doesn't only just, address women. It addresses every other person in life. And, there are little things that we do on our day-to-day basis that we don't even think is self-care. Something like brushing your teeth, taking a shower, getting a good night's sleep, eating, hello. Is it only women that do those things? I don't think so. Self-care is not just for women or just for people in poor mental health. It is for everyone. It's just that today we're discussing it in the context of our extended Mother's Day celebration, but otherwise self-care is for everybody. In your family, if you're a mother or woman and you do your self-care, it's great. You'll be energized. You'll be able to, be a great resource for the rest of your family members. But if the rest of them are not practicing self-care, guess what? It's going to cause a lot of stress even for you. So self-care is for everyone. Another myth is that self-care is selfish. Is it? I don't think so. Self-care, why do we do self-care? So we can unwind, so we can feel energized, so we can have these positive feelings. And so if we experience all that, it's easier for the people around us to actually, find us of use to them, find us to be meaningful to them. So self-care is not selfish. Yes, you're doing it for yourself, but in essence, you're going to, it's going to be a benefit to the people around you, because you won't have a lot to worry about yourself. You will have more energy to focus and support the people around you, your children, your family, your friends, etc. Another myth out there is that effects of self-care are temporary. Is that true? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Majorly, it's not. There are some things we do, to practice self-care that maybe will give us like temporary relief. For example, maybe a massage, maybe going for a short walk or a bath, they can help you unwind for the moment. But true self-care should not be temporary. It's something that we incorporate in our routine. That way, day to day, in and out, we are actually re-energized and able to support other people. And when we pick an activity for self-care, we want to be mindful about it, not just to do things to, check off on your list that, oh, I had a massage, oh, I traveled. No, be mindful about it, understand why you're doing it, and recognize that this is not something you're doing it in the moment, but part of your lifestyle, so that the main goal is really to prevent burnout in the end. Another myth is that self-care takes too much time. Does it? Maybe some types of self-care do, but they don't have to. Self-care could be as simple as, if you're working, you take a small break. I know, like my place of work, a lot of people take smoke breaks. I'm like, oh, they're always taking breaks. But, they know themselves. And for them, having a quick smoke is part of their self-care. For some people, going outside for some fresh air, maybe a little sunshine, That's self-care. Other people, it could be a quick nap, or just closing your eyes to just, calm your brain and distance yourself from the so many activities that are going on in the world. So self-care really doesn't have to take too much time. One other myth is that self-care is doing anything that soothes or pampers you. Yes, we do things that pamper us. Yes, we do things that soothe us. Things like earlier I mentioned, maybe overindulging with food or too much alcohol, too much TV, too much shopping. Yes, those things can provide temporary relief, but that's not really healthy. We want to focus on healthy and non-harmful activities so that we can promote good health. Sometimes self-care can be setting boundaries or getting your heart rate up. Is that soothing? Maybe not. But at the end of the day, do you feel nice? I bet you do. What about paying your bills? Does it feel nice to pay your mortgage and your property tax? Probably not, but is that part of self-care? Yes. So in other words, self-care is not necessarily always soothing or pampering yourself. One other myth also is that self-care requires resources that you do not have. If you tell somebody, I need to take care of myself, and they may suggest, you need to take a vacation to Hawaii, you're stressed out. No, it doesn't have to be that way, and we don't want to dismiss the fact that going to Hawaii might be, very relaxing and feels nice, or going on a cruise during pre-pandemic days. Those things are wonderful. But self-care doesn't necessarily have to mean that you spend resources you don't have. I mentioned earlier taking a quick nap, going for a quick walk, talking to a friend. I don't think that those things cost money. If they do, it won't be a lot. What about taking a nice long shower and seeing while you're at it? I bet you're not going to be spending a lot of money doing all of that. Taking a break is one of those other things. I have so many myths here. I don't know if I'll get through the list. Let me just mention a couple more and then we can carry on. One other myth about self-care is that it means you're making a choice between you and other people, which is similar to what we discussed earlier about selfishness. Loving, nourishing yourself so you can be useful and meaningful to other people, especially those ones that depend on you, doesn't mean that you're choosing you. You're actually choosing them in a way, because when you're energized, you have more to bring to the table, as opposed to when you're burned out, uninterested, and not being able to contribute as you normally would. Self-care is the same for everyone. This myth is also out there, and it's really important to recognize that we are all created individually. We are all different. What works for me may not necessarily work for somebody. Some of us, self-care means getting on that private jet and going to the mountains for a little tour. For other people, self-care means calling your friend and going to the park with your friends, going to have brunch, going to have your coffee with your friends. For some people, and recently I was working with a friend, and we were talking about how nice it is to be out there, have a walk, and me, I love to smell the trees, watch the birds, listen to the sounds around me. And we were talking about the pandemic, how we have seen a lot of people come out, walk, pick up jogging, something they didn't do. And then we said, that's really nice. But then we said there's some people who actually don't think that getting outdoors is beneficial. And some people may find that picking a book to read and just on their couch relaxing is what helps them. That's part of their self-care. So in other words, what works for me doesn't necessarily work for you, because we are all different. We have different priorities. We have different preferences. We have different likes and dislikes. And it's okay to acknowledge that self-care is not the same for everybody. Here is another good one, probably one of my second last myths. And by the way, you guys, there's a lot of myths out there. So we're just only covering maybe 10% of this. That you have to earn the right to practice self-care. Really? You don't have to earn a right to practice self-care. Make that part of your daily routine. Self-care is not necessarily a reward, but it's something you do to keep yourself going. Because, trust me, if you reach a point of burnout, you probably spend more resources addressing that than focusing on preventative measures. Here is my last myth. Self-care is just about things that make you feel good, which is similar to what I mentioned before about pampering and soothing yourself. But sometimes self-care is doing things that are actually awful in the moment. How many of you like cleaning your houses? Maybe some of you do. Doing your dishes, doing your laundry, right? Cooking, right? Cleaning your children's bathrooms if they are messy. Is that fun? No. But is that part of self-care? Absolutely. So these types of things can benefit you in the future, even if you don't feel great in the present. And now that we've discussed mom guilt, and Kate, thank you, you introduced us to self-care, let's look at some of the benefits of self-care. And then after that, we'll talk about types of self-care. And then we'll have one more segment before we are done. So, Kate.
Okay. So there are various benefits of self-care. Just seeing some of the things that Rose has mentioned already, I think we can already begin to see how we benefit from self-care. Self-care makes us more productive. And when we say that you're more productive, sometimes if we're not taking care of ourselves, we take on more than we can. And yet slowing down actually makes us productive. Being able to say no to certain things over others means that we're able to attend to the things that we actually need to. So we're more productive. Self-care means self-care improves our resistance to disease. As Rose has mentioned, self-care doesn't have to be all the fancy things. Taking vitamins, taking our supplements, doing our exercises, being mindful, getting rest is self-care. And that helps boost our immunity, helps us manage illnesses better, be more aware of how we're doing. And the thing about some of the activities we do is that they actually activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is healthy for us in our functioning. So the more we incorporate these activities into our routines, the better we feel, the better we cope under stress. And then another thing with self-care is for those who exercise, it improves physical health. If we're watching our diet, if we are conscious of the things that we shop, then we are in better physical shape. Self-esteem, another benefit of self-care is that it builds self-esteem. The more time you give to yourself, the better you feel about yourself. The more time you give to yourself, the better the conversation that you have with yourself. And the interesting thing is that when we take care of ourselves better, we set a standard for how people treat us. Nobody is going to invest more in you than what you show you are. The value we give to ourselves is the value that people give to us. And another benefit of self-care is that it increases self-knowledge and self-awareness. I cannot count the number of times I have not felt good. And then, I don't know, I'm sure all of you have experiences where you sit down for a few minutes and you realize, oh, my legs are paining. You have been going on and not listening to yourself, but realizing when you sit, you realize you have pain. Or when you eventually sit, you realize you're hungry and you haven't eaten all day. So one of the benefits of self-care is that it gives you time to listen to yourself. It gives you time to listen to your body. It gives you time to pay attention to your emotions and to actually be able to reflect and know what exactly that you're experiencing. So there are a lot more benefits to self-care, but that's just to mention a few of them. And of course, self-care also allows you to give to others, because if you do not have, then you cannot give. So the more you invest in yourself, whether it's with time, the more you're able to give, because you're replenished and rejuvenated and able to accommodate others. So I think I'll let Rose then get into the types of self-care.
Thank you again, Kate. We have various types of self-care, and one type of self-care is sensory self-care. Sensory self-care is where you're engaging all your senses, your sense of smell, your sense of taste, sense of touch, sound, and all that. So, you want to always be in tune with your sensations around you moment by moment by engaging all those senses. And it's really important that we are in the present, in the moment. I don't want to be in a meeting or talking to somebody, but my mind is somewhere else. So we really have to make a conscious decision to be present and allow all our different senses to participate in that moment. When we talk about the sense of smell, we may be talking about things like baking or, smelling different aromas. And I know there's a lot of discussions about scents and aromas, but really, obviously you want to do research about what types of scents we're using so that, because there are products out there that can be very, very toxic to us. So, but, it's important for most people to enjoy that sense of smell. When it comes to the sense of touch, we're talking about maybe a massage or maybe a hug. Like I have one of my kids is a teenager and the other is a preteen. And I make it a point every day to hug them because I know, hugging somebody brings that wonderful, beautiful sensation to you and also to the people you're hugging. So if we can practice that with those people we feel safe around, our family members, that's one way of practicing self-care. Taste. How about, we engage in enjoying favorite meals or different flavors that we like. And sometimes we might do like different, we might use different senses and each sense will complement each other. Maybe what's good for sense of taste, sense of smell also might be good from easy on the eyes. So, the different senses may also complement each other. The sense of sound. Maybe we prefer sounds that are calming, or maybe we want to listen to sounds that are energizing, and some people maybe like to listen to ocean waves or birds chirping, different kinds of music and all that. Sense of sight. This is where we maybe feel calm if we exposed to a certain kind of lighting. Maybe we prefer bright lighting. Some of us maybe prefer dim lighting. Some of us, if you love nature like me, I like being outdoors and looking around, look in the sky, look at the beautiful, clouds and how the sky looks when it's mixed with the, blue sky and the clouds, they're scattered and all that. Or, there are birds flying and, you start paying attention to how organized they are. They're very systematic in the way they move. Some of us may prefer, looking at the mountains. And have you guys noticed, like if you live in Calgary, everybody wants to head to the mountains. Why do they do that? Are they subconsciously maybe wanting to take care of their sense of sight? And maybe the air there is fresh and smells nice. So yeah, some people like to look at different mountains, maybe others like the ocean front or some other preferred landscape. I know people who like to go to safaris. I know people who like to go to zoos. So all of these are nice ways to, practice sensory self-care. sometimes with awareness, and sometimes we do these things subconsciously. Another type of self-care is emotional. So when we do emotional self-care here, we are engaging with our emotions, and we want to be careful not to judge ourselves. So, if you want to participate in an activity that helps you connect with other people, an activity that helps you process or reflect on a full range of emotion, that really is part of self-care. And let's face it, let's not be afraid or scared of acknowledging that, normally I'm able to manage my emotions very well, but it's getting to a point where I need a third party to step in. It can be in the form of family, form of church, or maybe a professional therapist. Actually taking that step to seek that professional help is part of self-care, because hopefully it can help you find ways to navigate those challenges you're facing so that you can get back to your baseline. And in some cases, if seeing a therapist for a prolonged period of time is what it needs to take care of that, need, so be it. Self-care is very, very important. Other ways we can emotionally self-care is writing in a journal. Some people like to maybe write poetry or just, document how their day is going. Some people are so creative that they'll just do arts and crafts. I know people who like painting as a form of emotional self-care, or even playing music. All of that is wonderful, wonderful. Another category of self-care is physical, and physical self-care is probably the most common we see. Getting enough sleep, nourishing your body with good nutrition and good food, going for walks. Especially in the pandemic now, I'm not sure if it was on the news or if it was somebody else talking to, and there's quite an observation that a lot of people are actually going outdoors, walking a lot, biking, going to the mountains and things like that. So things that we do to improve our physical well-being are wonderful, and sometimes can also complement our emotional well-being. Taking a walk during your lunch break, making sure you're sleeping your 8 hours a day. I mentioned that. Staying hydrated, drinking water. The fact that you're promoting your physical health will hopefully, and if we make this a habit, that's something that is good for us. One additional type of self-care is spiritual self-care. And this one means staying connected to God if you're a believer. There are some people who don't believe in God, but still practice spiritual self-care. Maybe there's some other higher up being that they believe in, or maybe they like to connect with nature or their values or things that matter to them. So spiritual self-care is definitely one other type of self-care out there, and it doesn't always have to be religious, because for the most part, when we talk about spiritual self-care, automatically we think religion. And the majority of us probably practice that. But other people, will practice things like meditation or yoga, or they may go to, some place in nature where, they're lost, in nature, and that's part of their spirituality. And I mentioned before when we were discussing myths that we are all different. So every person is going to have a different type of self-care that actually works for them. One other type of self-care, which I really, really like, and I practice a lot, is social self-care. And hello, have we all not noticed during the pandemic how we have all come to realize that we took our social interactions for granted? We have come to realize that humans are such social beings that if you take our social ability to socially connect, that we might actually get mad and break the rules. And I don't condone people break the rules, but during my quiet time, I'm like, I kind of understand why they're doing that, because we come from a culture where we have all these events happening, or we socialize with our friends and family, and then all of a sudden we're told we can't socialize. And we have seen what a toll that takes on our mental health. So really, it's just great to be wise and adjust to the times and find other ways of socially connecting with people like today. And I want to still thank each and every one of you for coming here. This is one way to socially connect through social media, through remote abilities and virtual events, if we are not able to see people in person. But before COVID, social connection could be in form of having brunch with your friends, going for a walk with your friends, going on a date, making time to call a loved one, or even going shopping with your friends. Well, conscious shopping, not going over budgets. Okay. The second last type of self-care is practical. Kate, feel free to jump in if you feel like something is speaking to you. So yeah, we have practical self-care, and this one refers to tasks that we do to complete, tasks that we complete to fulfill core aspects of our life, so that we don't experience stress. For example, creating a budget, paying your bills, taking professional development classes, organizing your closet. Some of you who have like 100 shoes in your shoe closets. And even gardening, things that we have to do day to day so that we are not stressed out. Because trust me, if your bills come back and you didn't pay them, you're gonna stress. So pay them on time, and that's really part of self-care, even when we don't realize that's what we're doing. And the last type of self-care is mental. And this is doing things, activities that stimulate our minds or our intellect. I think it was Osei, one of my friends here, Osei, mentioned reading books. I was reading some of the comments. Reading a book is part of mental self-care, solving a puzzle, playing games such as chess, going to a museum, etc., etc. Yeah, so those are the different types of self-care. The last thing we're going to discuss, and I know you guys have been patient, and thank you very much. We're going to be time conscious today. The last thing that Kate is going to discuss is how to practice self-care. And then hopefully you guys were writing your questions on the chat. So once Kate is done, we can, look at, oh yeah, Osei, you said painting. Painting is self-care. Thank you, Osei. So after Kate is done, we'll take some of your questions and we'll do our best to answer them. If we don't know the answers, we'll just tell you we don't know the answer. Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to start on how do you practice self-care. And to be able to address all of the things that we have touched on, I think one of the critical things about practicing self-care is setting boundaries. Setting boundaries means we're setting limits with others to protect our time, to protect our energy, to protect our physical and emotional well-being. It sounds simple, but protecting time means this is the time I've allocated for myself. And if somebody asks me what I'm doing, even if it's nothing, it doesn't mean I'm looking for something else to do. Protecting our energy, physical, and emotional well-being. And especially with this pandemic and all of the things that have been happening, I'm sure a lot of you have realized that when you watch the news or you listen to some of the things going on, you just feel emotionally and mentally drained. And self-care is actually the ability to choose what you're going to listen to. You don't have to listen to every bad story that you hear. You don't have to participate in every emotional roller coaster that's available to you if you feel that you cannot handle it. That's part of setting limits, part of setting boundaries. Boundaries help us live in alignment with our values. It helps us be able to say, this is what I believe in, this is what I choose to do, and I would like to have that respected. It helps us to create space between ourselves and others in our feelings, in our needs, in our beliefs, and in our interests. So it helps us to choose the people we want to do things with. It helps us to decide the things that we want to do with our time, with ourselves, with our families. It helps us choose our friends. So all of that is setting boundaries. And then it helps us strengthen our sense of self and helps us avoid enmeshment with others. I'm sure you have all at some point encountered experiences where you're sitting in a space and just the energy in the room makes you feel a certain way. And when you don't have a strong sense of self, it is so easy to not feel for others, but be caught up in the emotion. You can actually have compassion for other people without actually experiencing what it is they're going through. And having boundaries helps us have that sense of self and not be enmeshed with other people. How do we practice self-care? Self-care is being able to tell the difference between service and sacrifice. And I know sacrifice is a common thing. People believe it's the thing to do. It is such a big thing in our faith and in being good and in our cultures. And service actually represents the positive aspect of giving, while sacrifice represents the giving that involves some form of loss. And it's okay to sacrifice every once in a while. But the problem is that when we sacrifice, we lose our sense of self, we begin to feel resentful, and what felt like something we chose over time feels like we don't have choice, and we even begin to forget the intention of why we were doing something. It is not the action that determines service over sacrifice, but the intent and the energy behind it that can make it either a rewarding experience or a draining event. So we can't always live in sacrifice. It can't always be that you're doing for someone at the expense of yourself. It is possible to just be of service. Okay. Another thing towards self-care is being true to ourselves versus roles. When we're tied to a role, we're disconnected from our sense of choice. We make a decision from the mindset of the role rather than that of our real selves. And sometimes our cultures and our family systems reinforce these roles, and they're not supportive of changes. Because when we are stuck in a role, changing that role means everybody else has to reevaluate their role. I'm sure all of us here have had moments when we think or when we hear somebody say, oh, a good mom does this. A good sister does this. A good friend does this. When you do this, you're not being a good person. A good mom will do this. A good wife is supposed to be this particular way. But what would it look like for you to just be yourself? To know that you're a good person, that what you give at any point in time can always be your best. And it doesn't have to be defined by anything. What does it look like for everybody, let's say within a family system, to be able to do what they're best at and not necessarily assign something to somebody that doesn't necessarily enjoy doing it? So I think we need to find more opportunities to be true to ourselves than be stuck in roles. Another thing about self-care is how do we move towards self-care? Now, moving towards self-care will mean that we have a relationship with ourselves, that we are more connected to ourselves. And in being more connected to ourselves, we avoid the urgency that makes us need the validation and the approval of others. Another way that we can move towards self-care is building emotional intelligence. So that's being aware of bodily sensations, being aware of our belief systems, being aware of our reactions to the world around us, and having the ability to communicate assertively of the things that we need. And then connecting to our inner guidance. And our inner guidance is our faith, our inner guidance is our intuition. Developing a connection between our minds and our bodies. Our minds and our bodies, you can be amazed at the way your body and mind work together. if you pay attention, when you're stressed, there's a physical sensation to it. When you're happy, there's a physical sensation to it. And just being conscious of those things, trusting your feelings, honoring your needs, and listening to your body. And then there's also the ability to self-soothe. And that's mothering the inner child and nurturing the need that we all have for attention, for the need to feel safe, for the need to feel seen, for the need to feel heard, and the need to feel loved. I think so many times as women and as mothers, we feel that we need to give and give and give. And it's okay to get to that place where you feel, I also want to be able to have an opinion. I also want to be able to have somebody share something with me. I remember in our growing up, we would have so many occasions where, and I'm sure all of you have experienced, where somebody buys something in the house and the mother will give everybody but herself. And sometimes you want to have that feeling where you see your child have a piece of chocolate and be able to say, Mom, have a piece of it. We all have that need to be acknowledged, to be seen, to be heard, and to feel that we are loved by others. And then being able to communicate our wants and our needs with love, and learning to express ourselves from a place of love and not anger. And having self-care enables us to do that, because when we don't express our needs, over time we get resentful, and by the time we're asking for something, we're so angry, and nobody understands why you're feeling the way you're feeling. So being able to articulate what it is that you need from others and being able to express it. And a lot of time in our culture, we're very good at saying what we don't want, but not necessarily what we want. I'm sure we all remember situations where somebody says, so what do you want to have for dinner? I say, well, not rice. Well, I know you don't want rice, but you haven't said what you want. So just being able to articulate what it is that we want and be clear about it helps us to have our needs recognized. And then recognizing that conflict is an opportunity for growth. Every conflict we get in is not a bad thing. It is good to have differences of opinions. And it's okay to have situations where we are trying to exchange ideas, and being able to have the humility and willingness to look deeper into our pain and hurt as a gateway to our own healing. And that brings us largely to what we had with regards to self-care. Self-care is for everybody. Self-care is something that is possible. Self-care is something that we really all need to be doing and have the ability to do in some shape or form. And the thing about self-care is that when we model self-care as mothers, we're also teaching our children to take care of themselves. We're teaching our children to honor others when they see them needing to take care of themselves. So self-care is not something we're just doing for ourselves. It is also something that we're doing for those around us, because we're better people and we're teaching others that they also matter, and so they value us. So that brings us to the end of our presentation, and now to the questions. We hope that we have covered most of what you'd have liked to hear, and this has been meaningful time. And so we'll open the floor for any questions, thoughts, or comments that people may have.
You did a fabulous job. This was a great reminder of all the things we women have to do for self-care. As you were speaking, you were both speaking, one of the things that I also thought about was forgiveness. With us women, sometimes there's a lot of bickering going on and arguments, and the word forgiveness came into my mind because it's such a powerful word and it's so freeing. If you have an argument with someone, or if you're not agreeing with somebody or a friend or a sister or a family member, you just need to call that person and, talk about it and be able to forgive each other. And it's such a freeing thing that I have experienced it in my own life when I've been able to actually forgive someone or when someone has forgiven me. So I think one of the things that as women we can do for each other is to forgive each other.
That is a big one, Gloria, and thank you very, very much. Yes, it's true, because if you talk somebody about an issue you guys had to contend with, and at the end of the day, you're both feeling lifted and free. I mean, what better way to do self-care? You know, I've heard people say that when you don't forgive somebody, you're actually taking poison for yourself daily without even knowing. So having that release by just, you know, being able to talk to that person and clear the air is a wonderful, wonderful, thank you, Gloria, wonderful way to practice self-care. Somebody said, however, we seldomly, thank you, Beiswa, we don't always practice it, don't we? So true. Thank you, Gloria. Thank you, Beiswa. Osei has her hand raised. So I see a question coming. Go ahead.
Thank you, Rose and Kate. I found this session informative and empowering. Kate mentioned something about setting boundaries as a factor for self-care. My question is, how do you explain boundaries to young children? How do you tell them that this is my side, or how do you tell them about boundaries, and how do you enforce it with children that don't really understand what the word means?
Boundaries is an interesting thing in that we don't realize how early we can teach children boundaries. Boundaries starts with even just telling your kids that when you're coming into a room, you knock and you wait for somebody to tell you to come in. Boundaries means saying that you don't dig into your mommy's handbag, that you don't put fingers in somebody's food or off somebody's plate without asking. And all of these things, as they grow, of course, the boundaries increase. Boundaries means when somebody says don't touch or don't move into this space, you don't. And one of the things that has come up with boundaries is consent, is asking, is really being able to ask and say, can I do this? And accepting what a person says. Because also trying to force or convince or coerce somebody is a lack of respect of people's boundaries. When somebody says no, it's no. And teaching our children that means being consistent in saying this is not acceptable and please don't do it. So it starts as early as really children can understand.
And I think also to add to that, Kate, is you know, children are very, very smart beings. Sometimes they don't actually show. And by the way, I'm not a child expert, but I'm going to say that if I lower myself to the level of the child that's concerned, look them in the eye and say, how would you feel? You know, use real life examples. How would you feel if so-and-so did this to you? You know, and going to, you know, addressing it from that point of view, then they'll maybe take a moment and realize, no, I actually wouldn't like it. And hopefully then they can also practice that to their siblings and other kids around them.
Yeah. And additionally, I think to add to that is respecting our children's boundaries. You know, we forget as parents and think that we are not accountable in the same way. But being able to even say, even when your child says, well, I don't want to hug right now, not forcing it. So just being able to model some of the things that we are asking helps to reinforce these boundaries.
Okay. Seems like...
Sorry,
yes.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Rose.
I saw a comment from one of my dear friends, Millie Tuklam. She put a comment here that, you know, putting your phone on airplane mode. I'm thinking, Millie, you're talking about, ways to practice self-care. Are you still there? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, that's kind of my way of practicing self-care is, sometimes there's just so much going on, and especially with family back home.
Yeah.
When things are going on and everybody's calling, I just put my phone on airplane mode and nobody can reach me. So that's usually what I do.
Yeah, and you got to put yourself first. I know we already talked about, self-care now being selfish, right? I know people who go on holiday and leave their phones behind. Thank you so much, Millie. Beisu are saying, my children have done that for me. Yeah, well, they know something about self-care. Okay. I'm looking for more questions. No questions? Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yes. Good evening. Perpetuous, my name. I think I'm the only gentleman in this wonderful discussion today. Knowing more about self-care and it's something very, very important that not only women should adopt or take into consideration self-care, but also men. And looking at the society in which we find ourselves, coming back home into a new society and we hustle 24/7. I'll pick, I think, 2 points which I find it very, very important. First of all, anyway, let me say one point. Then I'm going to come up with another point based on the experience that I've had. So I think one of the presenters talked about forgiveness. I think it's very, very important in our society. When you forgive, I do believe you kind of let yourself, you liberate yourself. And I work for the Center for Newcomers. I have experienced a lot of divorce cases. We handle cases of divorce. And you find somebody coming, I'm done with him. Why? I'm done with him. I'm done. No tangible reason. Why don't you forgive and give somebody a second chance? I know at times it's so challenging. There are some aspects that might warrant divorce, but there are some aspects that doesn't really make any sense. Which I do believe forgiveness plays a very important role. If we can learn to forgive, it is very, very important. It's part of self-care. It's going to help us. Going to, we will be free. Another aspect that I also find very important as far as self-care is concerned is that, almost every newcomer or new immigrant is a hustler. You find some people picking shift until you're like, man, don't you rest? So it is high time we have to take into consideration these aspects. I've seen people who work 24/7. They leave home and they come back, might be on Sunday. So you're like, hey man, don't you rest? You have to take care of yourself. It is very, very important. It's not about picking up the extra sheet or the extra dollar. It's about your health. Thank you very much. I think that's what I have to say.
Thank you so much for Bete. Okay, so I just want to say thank you to our speakers for their amazing presentation. That's really nice. And, it was so insightful. It's one of those moments you think about yourself for a minute and find ways of improving your lifestyle. I am a co-believer of happy mom, happy home. So, some of those ideas that I've picked here, I'm definitely going to implement them in my life. Thank you so much for everyone for attending this event. I would just like to request that when you go to YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. We do have amazing videos there all the time. We are on LinkedIn, we are on Facebook, we are on Twitter. You can reach out to us. Thank you so much.